Welcome, and thank you for being here. In the next moments, we are heading to a working station far from Earth, where every system matters and every door matters. This is a story about pressure, control, and the kind of choices people make when the rules change mid-breath. I will not spoil anything for you. Just listen for what shifts first. Not the alarms. Not the shouting. The assumptions. All right. Let us begin. Asterline Relay Station sat in the Vesper corridor like a toll booth in deep space, all lights and locked doors. Cassian Reese arrived on a simple security contract, keep the docks calm while the Terran Relay Authority turned ships around. He had barely stepped onto the main concourse when the station changed its face. The shift was subtle at first, like a breath held too long. Every wall screen snapped to the same line of text, and the console displays mirrored it across the concourse. The message read, "Exclusion Edict," and the next line made it plain for any dockhand to understand. Earth was cut off from the relay network, effective immediately. Cassian did not need a speech to understand what that meant. A relay lane was the only reason a station like Asterline stayed alive. It was a marked corridor where tankers, repair crews, and emergency tugs could move without getting challenged. If the lane closed, no one brought air scrubber parts, no one brought heat coils, and no one brought the tow that kept stranded ships from drifting into nothing. Asterline had only what it had already stocked. Everything else was a promise that had just been revoked. Cassian read the room while everyone else stared at the screens. Dockhands froze with tools in their hands, and pilots stared down at their bracelets as if a new route might appear by will. Then the first physical change arrived, right on schedule. Asterline's overhead lights dimmed to a dull blue, and the air fans shifted pitch. Somewhere deep in the station, a door seal clunked and locked hard. Cassian felt it in his chest before he heard anyone say it out loud. "The lane locks are live," Rowan Pike said. Rowan came down the catwalk with a wrench still in his glove. He ran station heat and air like it was a stubborn engine, and he looked like someone who had been awake too long. "They just cut our resupply permissions," Rowan added. His eyes kept flicking toward the ceiling vents as if the station itself might turn against him. Cassian walked beside him, eyes already on the junction panels. He was not here to argue about votes. "Show me the first failure point," Cassian said. Rowan pointed past the cargo lifts toward a sealed hatch marked for authorized maintenance only. "Oxygen reclaimer core will run without new filters for a while, but not forever," Rowan said. He swallowed, then kept going. "Thermal coil bank is worse. We are already missing 2 coils, and we were waiting on a delivery." Cassian heard fast footsteps behind them. Dr. Ilara Voss slid into view with a med pack on her shoulder, like she had been born with a deadline chasing her. "We have a rescue ship docked at Kestrel Ring," Ilara said. She kept her voice level even as her fingers tightened on the strap. "The Kestrel Mercy. Crew and evac passengers, all adults. They were supposed to refuel and move on," she continued. "If this lane stays locked, they cannot leave." Cassian did the math without showing it on his face. No lane meant no fuel support, and no fuel support meant heat and power started failing in the wrong order. He kept his tone plain so everyone could hold on to it. Immediate goal is oxygen and heat stability, and a distress signal that does not rely on the lane. Ilara nodded once, and Rowan let out a breath like he had been waiting for someone to say something simple. It was not hope, but it was direction. Then the station speakers chirped, and a new voice rolled in, calm as a courthouse. "By order of the Concord Assembly, this facility is under compliance review. All outbound traffic is suspended," the voice continued. "All long-range transmissions are prohibited until cleared." Cassian turned toward the main concourse. People were already moving in a slow wave, pulled by fear and bad instincts. The first Concord Compliance Detachment team came through the airlock in pairs, boots loud on the deck. Their armor was light and clean, more like riot control than soldiers, but their posture said they expected obedience. They spread out fast, taking angles, hands near restraint gear. Commander Thane Kor led them, visor up, smile without warmth. He looked at Cashin like a man reading a label. Cashin Reese. Security contractor. Kor's eyes lingered on Cashin's belt and access clip. You will stand down. This station is now a controlled site. Cashin kept his hands visible and his voice flat. He was not going to make this about pride. I work for the station's safety, Cashin said. People are stuck here with you. If we lose heat, we lose control. Kor stepped closer, just inside personal space. That is not your concern. Compliance is my concern, Kor continued, and the word sounded like a weapon. Hand over your access credentials and any long-range comm devices. Elara shifted 1 foot back, ready to run if she had to. Rowan stared at the floor, jaw tight, as if he could not believe a vote could reach this far and still feel so personal. Cashin's eyes flicked to a wall panel behind Kor. The lane lock indicator was red, blinking slow. A second icon lit beside it, the one for station-wide rationing. That meant the system was already cutting corners. Cashin made his choice in the quiet place inside his head. He would not win this by telling Kor he was wrong. He would win it by keeping options alive. Fine, Cashin said. He unclipped the visible comm unit from his belt and held it out. Kor took it, satisfied, and that was the moment Cashin used. It was not a fight and not a heroic stand. Cashin stepped sideways and blocked Kor's line of sight to Elara and Rowan for half a second. With his other hand he tapped Rowan's forearm twice, a silent signal. Rowan understood. He turned and walked, not ran, toward the maintenance hatch as if he had been ordered to check a gauge. Elara moved with him, head down, blending into dock staff already being herded. Kor caught the motion late. You. Stop, he snapped, pointing at Elara. Cashin stayed between them. Dr. Voss runs medical triage. You want a panic, you pull her away. Kor's eyes narrowed. He did not like being managed by a man he had just ordered around. Doctor stays in medical, Kor said. Under our watch. The technician stays where I can see him, Kor added. No one goes into restricted areas. 2 officers shifted their stance to make it real. Cashin kept his mouth barely moving. Understood. Elara glanced at Cashin, question and anger and fear. Packed into one look. Cashin gave her only a calm nod. He needed her to do the next right thing, not the loud one. They separated by force, not by choice. Elara was escorted toward the clinic wing. Rowan was kept near the concourse, pinned by 2 officers who acted bored but watched his hands. Cashin was told to stay put, like a dog on a short leash. He did not stay put. Cashin drifted toward the service corridors like a man who belonged there. When a compliance officer stared at him, Cashin stared back without blinking. People who looked confident were often granted space. No one wanted to admit they were unsure. He slipped into a side hall and let the station's hum guide him. Asterline had a sound when it was healthy, a deep steady rumble. Now it had a thin edge, like a cheap fan struggling. A panel ahead showed oxygen trending down. Not collapsing, not yet, but moving in the wrong direction. Cashin reached the sealed hatch Rowan had pointed out earlier. The handle had a new lock collar, fresh metal, not station issue. Someone had installed it before the edict hit. Cashin ran his fingers along the collar and felt a tiny ridge, a rushed weld. It was not professional. It did not feel like Terran Relay Authority work. Someone set the trap early, Cashin murmured. He needed a way to get a message out without using the lane. He also needed a tool to keep moving through locked compartments. Both problems could be solved by one thing, if the station still had it. The null kit module. In station terms, it was the emergency locksmith and life support patch rolled into one. It mattered because the station was about to start sealing sections to save heat. Once those doors shut, you were either inside with air or outside with none. The module was kept in a small locker off the cinder maintenance spine, sealed and tagged for authorized disaster response. Cashin did not have that authorization anymore. Core had taken it, on purpose. Cashin pressed his ear to the locker door. No voices and no footsteps. He placed his palm on the metal and felt cold already creeping through. He could waste time trying to pry it with tools he did not have. Or he could make a choice that cost the station something now. To save it later. Cashin pulled a compact cutter from his pocket, old school and no network link. He set it against the seam and breathed out slow. He was about to trigger an alarm, and he knew it. The why is simple, he whispered. I need this kit to keep doors open and people breathing. The cutter bit into the seam with a low hiss. The smell of scorched paint filled the corridor. A red light blinked above the locker, and the station responded the way a wounded animal does. An alarm chirped once, not a full scream. It was just enough to say something had been forced where it should not be. Cashin yanked the door free and pulled the null kit module into his arms. It was heavier than it looked, like it was packed with bad news. A second later, footsteps hammered toward him. Cashin moved fast and quiet. He did not sprint down the main hall where cameras would track him. He slipped into the cinder maintenance spine, a long narrow service path that ran behind walls and under decks. It smelled of coolant and dust, and it was full of blind corners. The spine was the station's back alley. If you knew it, you could cross half the facility without being seen. If you did not, you got lost and ran out of air in a dark tube. Cashin knew it. He heard clipped voices behind him, sharp and close. Maintenance breach in Sector 9. Find him. Cashin kept moving, the module hugged to his chest. He did not know how far Core would go yet. He did know this. The Concord assembly had cut the lane, and the compliance team had come to hold the station still. Someone had installed locks in advance, and someone had decided the people on Kestrel Mercy were acceptable losses. Cashin reached a junction where the spine split. One path led toward the clinic wing where Ilara was being watched. The other led deeper into the station toward old comm lines and ignored hardware. Cashin paused for half a breath, just enough to choose. He would protect oxygen and heat, and he would get a signal out. He would also find who put that fresh lock collar on the hatch. He turned into the deeper path, where the lights were dim and the air felt thinner. The chase began. In earnest. Cashin Reese was already in motion, and his goal was simple. Keep Rowan Pike out of compliance hands long enough to keep the station breathing. The spine narrowed into a service run that smelled like hot dust and old coolant. Cashin carried the null kit module tight to his chest because it was the only tool left that could keep doors from turning into tombstones. Behind him, the sound of boots and clipped voices kept closing the distance. He needed Rowan because Rowan knew where the oxygen reclaimer core was weakest. He needed time because heat loss did not wait for politics to finish talking. And he needed to keep the station from splitting into isolated pockets. Isolated pockets were where people died quietly. Cashin slowed at a junction and listened. Two routes branched ahead. One went toward the main concourse, bright and watched. The other ran toward a darker maintenance loop behind the docking ring. The darker loop would hide him, but it could also trap him. He chose it anyway. A thin figure appeared at the far end of the loop, moving fast with uneven steps. Rowan Pike stumbled into view, hands up, two compliance officers on his heels. Rowan's face was pale with anger and fear. Cashin could tell he had been pulled away from his work mid-repair. Rowan saw Cashin and froze for half a heartbeat. It looked like disbelief. Cashin kept his voice low and steady. Rowan, move toward me. Do not run. Do it like you belong here. Rowan swallowed and obeyed, walking faster without breaking into a sprint. The officers accelerated, one reaching for a restraint strap. Cashin stepped out of the shadows, not to fight, but to redirect. He held the null kit module like a heavy toolbox and let the officers see it. Emergency response kit, Cashin said. Station survival equipment. If you stop him, you stop heat and air. One officer hesitated, just long enough to look unsure. The other did not. He lunged for Rowan. Cashin moved first. He pivoted into the officer's path and drove the module forward with both hands, not as a weapon, but as a block that stole balance. The officer hit the wall hard, breath knocked out in a silent cough. Cashin grabbed Rowan's wrist and pulled him into the maintenance loop before the second officer could recover. They ran now, because the moment for pretending was gone. Rowan gasped. They were taking me to the concourse. Core said I would be secured until further notice. That is their word for removed, Cashin said. You still know the heat map? Rowan nodded, eyes wide. Thermal coil bank is already cutting zones. If they keep sealing hatches, frostline will spread. Cashin felt the air fan pitch change again, higher, like a cheap heater struggling in winter. That meant the station was compensating, and compensating always had a limit. They reached a hatch with a manual wheel, old enough to be ignored by most station automation. Cashin slapped the panel with the null kit. The lock collar clicked loose with a sound that felt like a gift. Get inside, Cashin said. Fastest path to the core without crossing the concourse. Rowan stepped through, then paused, eyes flicking back down the corridor. Illyra? Cashin did not stop moving. I will get her. First I keep you useful. They sealed the hatch, and for a few breaths the world was quieter. Cashin listened to officers shout behind the door and pictured the moment their confidence turned into irritation. Irritation was when they started making mistakes. Cashin checked the corridor ahead. A maintenance cart sat half open, tools scattered as if someone had left in a hurry. The station was shedding normal life and turning into a place where only the urgent survived. He looked at Rowan. You guide me to the oxygen reclaimer core access. We stabilize air and heat, then we pull Illyra out before core turns her into leverage. Rowan nodded, but his mouth trembled. They already are. They told her she was under protective custody. Cashin gave him a flat look. Protective for them, custody for her. They moved deeper into the spine toward the parts of Asterline built for keeping the station alive when nobody was watching. Rowan led Cashin to a service balcony that looked down over a cargo lane called the mag clamp line. In normal operation it was a simple convenience, a magnetic tug path that moved heavy crates and fuel canisters without a human pushing them. It mattered now because Cashin needed to cross it to reach a maintenance door leading toward the core. It mattered more because the compliance team had taken control of it. Rowan leaned close, voice tight. They changed the clamp schedule. It is pulsing too fast. If you step in, it will grab you and throw you offline, Rowan finished, and he looked sick as he said it. Cashin watched the lane. A cargo sled glided by, then jerked sideways like it had been yanked by an invisible chain. It slammed into a bumper rail and sparks spit in short bursts. They want the lane to be a net, Cashin said. They are hunting. Rowan pointed at a vent grill above the lane. They adjusted atmosphere here too. Cashin could feel it. The air was heavier, like breathing through damp cloth. Not enough to knock a person down, but enough to slow a runner and make panic louder. They had turned the environment into a hand on his throat. Cashin acted. He pulled a small spool of line from the null kit and clipped it to a support strut. Then he snapped the other end to Rowan's belt. Stay behind me, Cashin said. If you feel a pull, drop your weight and do not fight it with your arms. Rowan swallowed. Illyra would hate that plan. She will hate it more if you get taken, Cashin said. Cashin waited for the next pulse by watching the sleds drift. When the magnets eased, he moved. Not a heroic dash. Fast, controlled steps on faded lane markers still visible if you knew where to look. Halfway across, the clamps fired early. Cashin felt it in his bones, a sudden tug at the soles of his boots. Rowan yelped as the tether snapped tight. Cashin dropped low, knees bent, and drove his palm into the deck. Friction burned through his glove. Now, Cashin said through clenched teeth. Drop your weight. Rowan did, but the lane did not care. The magnets caught Rowan's belt buckle and yanked him toward the sled path with brutal efficiency. The tether went taut like a snapped cable. Cashin did not try to pull Rowan up. He pulled Rowan sideways, away from the sled path, using the tether like a steering line. The move cost Cashin ground. His shoulder slammed into the lane rail, pain sharp and clean. Rowan slid out of the worst line just as a cargo sled screamed past, close enough to rip fabric. They made it to the far side, both breathing hard. Cashin forced his lungs to stay steady. Panic wasted oxygen, and oxygen was already the currency of the next few days. Rowan leaned against the wall, face slick with sweat. That was meant to kill. It was meant to take us, Cashin said. Dead is just the acceptable version of taken. He popped the maintenance door with the null kit, and the lock gave way with a click that felt too easy. They wanted him to go through. Cashin stepped into the dark service hall and kept moving anyway. Every step forward was a cost, but stopping was a bigger cost. The hall opened into a junction outside the clinic wing. Lighting here was warmer, human-friendly, meant to keep patients calm. That warmth was fading at the edges, like a heater losing faith. 2 compliance officers stood at the clinic doors. They were not relaxed. Cashin could hear Alara's voice inside, low and controlled. She was doing what doctors did when everyone else started breaking. She was giving someone a task so they would not fall apart. Cashin was about to step closer when the nearest wall screen flickered. A face appeared, older and sharper, dressed like a person who had never worn a tool belt in his life. The image was clean. The audio was crisp, and that alone told Cashin this was not a local transmission. Envoy Nera's call looked straight into the lens as if he could see Cashin through metal and distance. His voice was calm, like a man offering a fair deal over a glass table. Cashin Reese. You have removed restricted equipment and interfered with compliance operations. I am offering you a clean exit, call continued. Return the emergency module and surrender any evidence you believe you have found. In exchange, you will be escorted off the station and permitted to leave the corridor. Cashin kept his face blank. The offer was meant to sound like mercy. Call's eyes did not blink. You are not responsible for this station. You are responsible for your next decision. Cashin stepped closer to the screen, just enough to be seen. If you can reach me like this, you can reach the station with heat and air supplies. Call's expression did not change. The Concord Assembly has made its ruling. This is not a supply issue. This is a compliance issue, Call finished, and he made policy sound like gravity. People do not breathe compliance, Cashin said. For a fraction of a second, Call's expression tightened. Then the calm returned. You have one chance, Call said. Make the smart choice. Leave. Cashin turned away. Arguing was what Call wanted. Every second Cashin stood still was a second the station cooled. Cashin looked at the clinic doors. He could not fight here without risking patients and staff. He needed a diversion that moved attention away for 1 minute. Cashin backed into the service hall and whispered to Rowan. Can you trigger a localized thermal fault alarm? Rowan stared, scared. That will pull power from somewhere else. Somewhere else is already dying, Cashin said. I need them to step away from the clinic door. Rowan nodded and went to the nearest access panel. Cashin watched his hands. Rowan moved like a mechanic, hearing an engine misfire and knowing exactly which bolt to turn. A soft alarm chirped in the distance, then another. It was not station-wide, but enough to make people with orders look at each other. One guard keyed his mic and frowned, and the other shifted his feet, uncertain. Cashin moved in that uncertainty. He slipped around the corner and used the null kit to pop a maintenance latch into the clinic side corridor. He eased inside, steps silent, breathing controlled. He was in a place where people were vulnerable, and that meant he had to be precise. Elara appeared at the end of the corridor, seeing him as if she had expected him. Her eyes flashed with relief, then anger. "What did you do?" Elara asked. "I bought us a minute," Cashin said. "We leave now." Elara shook her head. "I cannot. They are holding my staff. If I move, they will lock the ward." Cashin gave her a task instead of a promise. "You come with me to keep Rowan alive. You are the only one who can keep him working if he collapses," Cashin continued. "We stabilize core access, then we come back for your staff." Elara's jaw tightened. She hated leaving anyone behind. That was why Call had chosen her as leverage. She took one step toward Cashin, then froze as a shadow fell across the corridor. Commander Thane Kor stepped into view from the far end, flanked by two compliance officers. He had moved faster than Cashin expected. That meant Kor was not just a bureaucrat with a badge. He was a hunter with patience. Kor smiled, enjoying being right. "Dr. Voss. Back to your room." Elara's shoulders squared. "My room is full of patients." Kor ignored her words and focused on Cashin. "You cannot help yourself. You have to fix things." Cashin kept his stance loose. His goal was not to win a fight here. His goal was to get Elara out. Kor raised a hand and the officers stepped forward. Cashin took Elara's elbow and guided her toward the side hatch he had opened. "Go." Elara hesitated for a heartbeat, then obeyed. She slipped through the hatch like a person who knew there was no time for pride. Cashin followed, but Kor was faster than Cashin wanted. A compliance officer slammed into Cashin's shoulder, trying to pin him. Cashin twisted and used the officer's momentum to turn him into the door frame. No flourish and no extra force, just enough to clear space. Then the hatch behind Cashin clanged shut. Not by Cashin. Elara cried out from the other side. "Cashin?" Cashin looked back at the seam and saw a new lock collar slide into place, smooth and confident. That collar was not station issue. It had the same rushed weld ridge he had felt earlier. Kor's voice came through the intercom, calm as a man closing a deal. "Doctor stays. You run. That is the only way you get your exit," Kor added, and the offer sounded like a threat dressed as reason. Cashin's throat went tight, but his face stayed still. The trap was not just about him. It was about her. He turned away and forced his thoughts into the next step. He could not free Elara here without turning the clinic into a battlefield. That would kill the very people she was trying to protect. He needed a new plan, and he needed a new angle. He also had to accept the truth that landed with a heavy thud. Elara Voss was now the price. Cashin found Rowan in a low-service bay near the core access ladder, crouched by a panel with both hands shaking. Rowan looked up and saw Cashin alone, and his face fell. "Where is Elara?" Rowan asked. Cashin did not sugarcoat. "Held." Kor sealed her behind a collar that was not station issue. Rowan's eyes went wet, then hard. "So they planned it." Cashin nodded once. "Yes." Rowan forced himself to focus. "Then they will tighten rationing. They will make it look like a normal shortage." Cashin stepped closer to the panel and saw the simple gauges Rowan had pulled up, not fancy screens. Thermal reserve sat low, and oxygen filter life was trending down faster than Rowan's earlier estimate. "They are forcing it," Rowan said. "They rerouted power. They are making coils work harder. That burns them out faster," Rowan finished, voice shaking with anger. Cashin felt cold anger settle into place, useful and steady. Core was not just holding Alara, he was shortening the clock. Cashin pressed the null kit against the access latch and popped it. The ladder hatch opened with a reluctant groan, releasing a breath of colder air from below. "We go to the core access," Cashin said. "You show me the manual bypass." Rowan stared into the dark. "If they detect it, they will seal this section." "That is why we do it fast," Cashin said. "Tell me what to pull and why." Rowan nodded and started down. Cashin followed, listening for boots above. The core corridor was a long metal throat lined with pipes and insulation. The air smelled like dry ice and stressed wiring. Somewhere in the walls, thermal coils clicked in uneven rhythm like a tired engine misfiring. Rowan guided Cashin to a service panel and pointed to a manual lever. "This reroutes heat to the frostline sector," Rowan said. "It will not fix everything. It will slow the spread." Cashin gripped the lever. "What is the cost?" Rowan answered fast. "It drains reserve faster. It buys time for people on dock, but it makes the core run hotter. If we do not get new coils, we still lose later," Rowan finished. Cashin pulled the lever. The station responded with a low groan, metal settling under stress. The air fans changed pitch again. Cashin felt faint warmth return. It was small, but it made the next hour possible. Then a short alert tone chimed, and Core's voice slid into the local speaker, pleasant as poison. "Unauthorized reroute detected. Power rationing increased. Section seals will engage as needed to maintain compliance safety," Core added, as if civilians were the threat. Rowan looked at Cashin, fear flaring. "They are going to choke us out." Cashin kept his eyes on the corridor ahead. "Yes." He listened for footsteps and heard them, multiple sets, disciplined and closing. Cashin shifted the null kit in his hands. "We have two jobs now," Cashin said. "Keep the core stable and get Alara back." "We do not get either by waiting here," Cashin added. Rowan's breathing hitched. "How do we get her if they can seal doors like that?" Cashin looked up at pipes running toward the clinic wing. He had seen rushed welds, and he had seen collars placed where they wanted the story to go. "We find the person installing collars," Cashin said. "We take away their hands. Then we pull Alara out," Cashin finished, and it sounded like a promise made of steel. A boot hit the ladder hatch above, loud and close. Cashin pushed Rowan toward a side passage and moved. Not toward safety, but toward the only path that could change the rules. Cashin Reese needed two things right now. He needed to keep Asterline warm enough to function, and he needed to get Dr. Alara Voss out of Commander Thane Core's grip. The core corridor felt colder than before. Frostline spread, and the station responded by sealing doors to save what it could. That meant trapping people on the wrong side. Rowan hurried beside Cashin with a small tool pouch bouncing at his hip. He kept glancing at the pipes as if the metal itself might give him a warning. "It is moving faster," Rowan said. "The cold is rolling into the docking ring." Cashin checked a wall gauge. The needle was low and still dropping. "Then we do not wander," Cashin said. "We pick one move that saves the most lives." A muffled shout echoed from ahead, followed by a hard metallic thud. Cashin stopped at the corner and listened. Dock staff were pinned in a side bay behind a hatch that had sealed mid-cycle. The bay's heater vents were dead, and breath showed in faint white puffs. A cargo loader had stalled half inside the doorway, making the seal worse. Rowan leaned in. If they stay in there, they will go hypothermic. Cashin's hand tightened around the null kit. He could open the hatch and pull them out, or he could keep moving toward the clinic wing. He had one body and one clock. Cashin chose the move that prevented panic, because panic would kill faster than cold. Rowan, stay back and watch the corridor, Cashin said. If compliance comes, you run. Rowan swallowed. And you? I am faster with a door than they are with a crowd. Cashin said. He braced the module against the seam. The null kit chirped once, soft and steady, and the lock collar clicked. Cashin shoved the stalled loader back with his shoulder. It moved an inch, then another, and the seal released with a hiss of cold air. 3 dock workers stared at him with wide, exhausted eyes. Move, Cashin said. You follow my voice and you do not stop. One of them, an older man with cracked knuckles, tried to speak. His teeth chattered too hard for words. Cashin grabbed his sleeve and pulled him forward. You can thank me later. Right now you breathe and walk. They stumbled into the corridor and hugged the warmer wall like it was a fire. Cashin guided them to a maintenance stair away from dead vents. Stay together, Cashin said. If a door starts to close, you do not split. The older man managed a rough nod. What about the people on the rescue ship? Cashin kept his face neutral. That is why you keep moving. Someone has to keep the station alive long enough to get them out. He left them at the stairwell and returned to Rowan. Rowan looked at him like Cashin had just spent something precious. You bought them time, Rowan said. I spent time, Cashin replied. Now I earn it back. They moved toward the clinic wing again through service routes that stayed out of concourse lights. At another junction Cashin spotted a new collar welded to a different hatch, metal still raw and the same rushed ridge. Someone was laying traps like bread crumbs. This is not just core, Cashin said. Someone is feeding him tools. Rowan's eyes darted to the collar. You think there is a station inside her? I think the station is being prepared, Cashin said. And I am supposed to play my part. A bulk seal engaged in the distance, deep and final. The station was cutting itself into smaller pieces. Cashin made the next decision fast. We go for Ilara now. If they can hold her, they can hold everyone. They reached a dim service nook near the clinic wing. The collar on the side hatch sat around the seam like a metal bracelet, fresh and wrong. Cashin pried an inspection plate loose and found a tiny raised seal on the collar metal. A chronoseal stamp. Rowan leaned close. That is a certification mark. It proves a part was approved. Cashin nodded. If it is legit, it matches the station timeline. Rowan frowned. And if it does not? Then someone forged it or moved it, Cashin said. Either way, it is a lie you can hold in your hand. Cashin compared the stamp to the station's own maintenance tag nearby. The tag reflected the station's current cycle, and the collar stamp did not. Rowan's voice went tight. That is wrong. The station would not certify a collar without logging it. Cashin pocketed the inspection plate with the stamp impression. It was not glamorous evidence, but it was physical. It was the kind of thing a jury could understand without a translation. Rowan looked down the corridor. Call's offer was not about the kit. It was about this. Cashin kept his voice low. Yes. That means Ilara is not only leverage. She is bait, Cashin said. The collar squealed softly as metal tightened under pressure. If it locked fully, the side hatch might never open without cutting. Cashin decided to go around instead of through. Rowan, show me the clinic vent path. The one that ends behind the ward wall. Rowan blinked. Those are narrow. I am not bringing a stretcher, Cashin said. I am bringing a person. They climbed a service ladder into a low crawlspace above the clinic, a place that smelled like lint and old filters. The vent panels rattled as the station flexed under temperature change. Rowan whispered, trembling. If you get stuck in a seal engages, you will not have room to turn. Cashin did not pretend otherwise. Then I do not get stuck. He slid forward, belly to metal, the null kit strapped tight to his side. Below, the clinic ran on muffled fragments, coughs, quiet voices, a chair scraping. Ilara was down there doing her job while being held like property. Cashin reached the final grate and pushed it loose with slow pressure. Warm air breathed up, carrying antiseptic and fear. He dropped silently into a storage alcove behind the ward wall. A cart of sealed med packs sat by the door. Cashin eased the door open a crack. Ilara stood down the hall with a guard near her. Ilara glanced up and saw Cashin's reflection in a glass cabinet. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. Cashin signaled with 2 fingers. Move to me. Quiet. Now. Ilara did not rush. She walked like she was retrieving supplies. I need another pack of wound sealant, Ilara said to the nearest guard. The guard shrugged and let her pass. In places like this, people wanted to believe they were still normal. Ilara slipped into the alcove and Cashin shut the door behind her. You are freezing the station to force compliance, Ilara said. People are going to die because of this. Cashin kept it short. I know. We leave now. I need you alive and free. Ilara's hands clenched. My staff. I will come back, Cashin said. Not with a plea. With leverage. Ilara studied him for half a heartbeat. She hated it, but she understood. Boots stomped down the corridor with purpose. Cashin had been seen. Ilara's eyes flicked to him. That is not Core's rhythm. Cashin listened, and he agreed. These steps were quiet, disciplined, and fast. The retrieval cadre had arrived. They did not shout orders for an audience. They moved like people retrieving property. Cashin opened a rear panel and found a maintenance hatch into the arclight service ducts. Cashin pointed at the opening. You first. Ilara stared. I am not built for that. You are built for surviving bad rooms, Cashin said. Go. Ilara crawled into the duct. Cashin followed and pulled the hatch shut. The duct was narrow and cold. It smelled like dust and faint ozone. Cashin could hear the retrieval cadre in the walls through controlled movement, soft scrape of boots, brief click of a latch. He kept the plan simple. Get Ilara to Rowan. Avoid contact. Preserve the chronoseal plate. Reach a spot where station seals could be used against hunters. Ilara panted quietly. They will seal these ducts, right? If they can, Cashin said. That is why we do not stop. They reached a junction where 3 branches met. Cashin paused and listened. A faint scrape came from the left branch, close. Cashin chose the right branch and signaled Ilara forward. A low hum grew into a thrum. A seal motor spun up nearby. Ilara flinched. They are hurting us. They are trying, Cashin said. Ahead, a grate opened into a utility closet. Cashin pushed it loose and helped Ilara drop down. The closet stank of coolant and old rags. A single bulb flickered overhead. Cashin dropped after her and closed the grate softly. The closet door handle turned from the outside. Smooth and confident. A retrieval cadre operative stepped in, visor low, posture calm. The operative raised a small scanner like a person checking a delivery label. Cashin moved first. He shoved Ilara behind him and lunged. The operative sidestepped with training. Cashin struck the scanner hand and knocked the device into the wall. It clattered to the floor. The operative reached for Cashin's wrist, trying to bind or control. Cashin twisted, drove the operative into the door frame, and slipped past. "Run," Cashin said to Ilara. Ilara ran into the corridor. Cashin followed and slammed the closet door shut, jamming it with a maintenance bar. They sprinted down a service hallway toward a ladder well leading back to the core access bay. The corridor lights dimmed again. Temperature dropped like a thermostat turned down in a crowded house. A harsh buzz sounded above, and a thin haze puffed from a vent. It was not smoke, just dry cold air dumped to push them away from a route. Ilara coughed once and kept going. "They are not trying to hurt us," Ilara said. "They are trying to guide us into a cage." Cashin nodded. "Yes. That means they want something specific." They hit the ladder well. Cashin shoved Ilara down first, then followed. At the bottom, the ladder well opened into the service bay where Rowan had been working. Rowan looked up and saw Ilara, and his face cracked with relief. Then Cashin heard a soft chirp from his belt. Cashin's stomach tightened. He had planned to use the analog burst beacon later to push a signal through a non-standard channel. Now it chirped because someone had just paired to it. Cashin spun and saw a retrieval cadre operative at the threshold holding a capture pouch like a person collecting a lost wallet. The operative flicked the pouch open. The beacon snapped toward it under a short-range magnet. The pouch sealed with a soft slap. Cashin lunged, but the operative was already retreating. Cashin stopped, because chasing would split the group. Splitting was what the station killed now. Ilara stared at him. "Was that our way out?" "It was one way," Cashin said. "Now it is their way to track us." Rowan looked between them. "If they can take that, what are they really here for?" Cashin opened his palm and showed the chronoseal inspection plate. "This is what they do not want leaving." "The station." Ilara's eyes hardened. "So Call and Core are the front door." "This is the back door," Ilara added. Cashin nodded. Cold kept creeping into hallways and lungs. A quiet click came from Rowan's panel. A new rationing stayed engaged. The station took more life support away to protect the core. Ilara grabbed Cashin's sleeve. "My staff. The patients." "I know," Cashin said. "We are not done." Rowan pointed at a simple list of sealed sections. One entry was not a wing and not a system. It was a person. Merrick Hollis. Cashin's mind locked onto it. The retrieval cadre had not come for a random contractor. They had come for a witness. Cashin forced one sentence into the open, clear enough to steer the next phase. "Ilara was leverage," Cashin said. "Merrick Hollis is the real target." Cashin looked at Rowan. "Where is Hollis?" Rowan's throat bobbed. Dockside syndics moved him earlier. They said it was for safety. Cashin's eyes narrowed. "That is not safety. That is delivery." Ilara stepped closer. "If they get him, the lie becomes permanent." Cashin tightened the strap on the null kit module. "We find Merrick Hollis. We keep him breathing," Cashin said. "Then we force the truth through a door they cannot lock." Cashin Reese had one clear job now. Find Merrick Hollis before the retrieval cadre did. The service corridors near Dock Theta felt like a winter house with broken windows. The air fans kept shifting pitch, and every shift meant the station burned something it could not replace. Ilara kept pace behind Cashin, face set in hard calm. Rowan moved with them, clutching a simple maintenance tablet like a map home. He kept listening for the soft, disciplined steps of hunters. "Where did they take Hollis?" Cashin asked. Rowan swallowed. "A syndic's holding bay off the cargo loop. It is labeled protective shelter." Ilara's voice stayed low. "Protective from what?" Rowan did not answer. The answer was already in their lungs. Cashin stopped at a junction and checked another hatch seam. A fresh collar had been added, metal raw. A faint stamp impression sat on the edge. Cashin kept moving. He did not need another reminder. They reached the cargo loop and saw the holding bay door. Two people stood outside, not in Concord uniform, but in syndics jackets. Hands empty, posture wrong, too still. Cashin walked up like he belonged. There. Shoulders loose, voice flat. I am here for Merrick Hollis, Cashin said. There is a station medical order. He needs to be moved. One syndic frowned. Not without clearance. Cashin gave the simple reality. Frostline is cutting sections. If you keep him here, you will be moving a body later. The syndic glanced toward the corridor, unsettled. The other syndic reached for the panel like he might do the decent thing. Then Cashin heard quiet steps. Not hurried and not loud. The retrieval cadre was close. Cashin pressed the null kit to the panel. The lock clicked clean and fast. The door slid open a few inches. Cashin pushed it wider and slipped inside, with Alara and Rowan right behind him. The holding bay smelled like stale air and emergency rations. A single heater vent blew weak warmth, just enough to fool people into thinking they had time. Merrick Hollis sat on a bench, hands cuffed to a rail. His eyes snapped up, sharp and scared. Who are you? Merrick asked. Cashin kept it plain. Cashin Reese. Terran Relay Authority contractor. I am getting you out. Merrick laughed once, ugly and short. They do not let people out right now. Alara stepped closer and assessed him with a quick medical glance. Are you hurt? Not yet, Merrick said. They are saving that for later. Rowan moved to the cuffs, fingers shaking but fast. He found the release pin. Cashin watched the door and listened. A faint scrape outside, then a pause. It was the sound of someone choosing an angle. Cashin looked at Merrick. Why are they after you? Marek's jaw clenched. Because I saw the wrong thing. Because I signed the wrong line. Cashin kept it tight. What did you see? Merrick hesitated, then spoke like the words had been burning him. Project Glass Vote. Rowan froze. Alara's face tightened. Merrick kept going. They called it a procedural integrity project. They said it prevented fraud. I was contracted to certify timing seals on new station collars and route locks, Merrick said. The seals prove a restriction was installed after a lawful decision. Cashin stayed steady. And? Merrick swallowed. The seals were already on the parts. Before the vote happened. I saw the stamps. I saw the batch logs, Merrick said. It was staged. Alara leaned in. So the exile vote was not the start. It was the cover. Merrick nodded hard. They needed a public reason to lock Terran lanes. Then they needed a quiet way to erase anyone who could prove locks were planted early, Merrick said. Cashin forced one sentence into the open, clean and usable. They are wiping witnesses. You are the receipt. Rowan freed the cuffs. Merrick rubbed raw wrists. Cashin gripped Marek's shoulder. You come with us now. You talk later. Merrick stood on unsteady legs. They will not let me make it 2 corridors. Cashin looked toward the door. Then we make the corridors work for us. A retrieval cadre operative slid into view through the gap, visor low. The operative lifted a small device like a person about to tag an item for pickup. Cashin pushed Merrick behind him. Rowan, go first with Merrick. Alara, stay glued to him. Alara nodded and braced Merrick by the elbow. Cashin stepped to the door and moved. He went straight at the operative's centerline, forcing a choice. The operative shifted sideways. Cashin used that shift to slam the door panel with the null kit. The door tried to close. The operative tried to wedge a boot. Cashin drove his shoulder into the seam. The boot slipped. The door sealed with a hard thunk. Cashin turned and ran after the others. They hurried through a narrow passage lined with storage cages. Frost dust clung to metal edges. Marek's breathing was shallow. Ilara kept him moving with firm, quiet words. Short steps, Ilara said. You do not sprint. You save your air. Rowan pointed ahead. Service crossover bypasses the concourse. They reached a hatch with a station keypad. Cashin pressed the null kit to it. The lock clicked and the hatch opened onto a wider corridor. Warmth hit them, sudden and almost comforting. Cashin's gut tightened. Warmth in a dying station was never free. The corridor lights were steady here, too steady. A wall heater unit hummed louder than it should. Marek exhaled with relief. This is better. Ilara shook her head sharply. No. This is wrong. Rowan whispered, eyes wide. They are dumping heat into this corridor. They are making it feel safe. Cashin spotted the hardware that confirmed it. Thick pin-like locks sat on both ends of the corridor. Cold lock bolts. Rowan spoke only what Cashin needed. They clamp a hatch shut even if the station wants it open. It isolates a section from the rest. Rowan added. Once they engage, we cannot move out. Cashin changed the plan while moving. They want us in a warm box. Then they cut heat and wait for panic, Cashin added. Rowan glanced at the bolts. There has to be a manual release nearby. Maintenance has to service it. Cashin's eyes found an access panel halfway down, newer metal around it, the same rushed weld ridge. They did not even paint it, Cashin said. Footsteps sounded behind them, soft and steady. The retrieval cadre had found another route around the sealed holding bay. Cashin pushed Marek and Ilara forward. Keep moving. Do not stop in the warm spot. Marek stumbled, confused. But it is warm. Ilara answered, clipped. Warm is the bait. Keep walking. Cashin popped the access panel with the null kit. Inside was a mechanical lever cluster. Rowan stepped beside him, hands shaking. That lever disengages the bolt system. It triggers a local alarm and dumps cold back into the corridor, Rowan said. It buys a window, but it tells them where we are. Cashin pulled the lever. Heaters cut out instantly. Warmth vanished like a lie being wiped away. The corridor lights flickered. A low alarm chirped. The bolts retracted with a metallic clack. The far door seam loosened. Cashin ran to catch up. They pushed through the far door as bolts began to extend again. Cashin shoved the door closed behind them. He heard bolts slam back into place. Ilara looked at him, eyes hard. That was close. Cashin gave a brief nod. That is their weakness. They need doors serviceable, Cashin said. That means they leave a handle somewhere. We find the handles. We survive, Cashin added. Marek's voice trembled. They are making it look like an accident. Cold. Seals. Shortage, Marek said, and he sounded like he wanted to vomit. Cashin looked at him. Yes. That is why you keep breathing. They reached a cramped service gallery overlooking relay trunks. The space smelled like hot insulation and dry metal. Cold here was less aggressive because relay systems bled waste heat into walls. Cashin gave Marek a moment to breathe, then kept it tight. Talk, Cashin said. What did you record? What can you prove without a network feed? Marek pulled a thin metal tag from his pocket, a stamped maintenance chit. I took an impression from the chronoseal batch tool. It leaves a unique defect pattern, Marek said. Like a tire tread. You can match it. Rowan leaned in, eyes sharp despite fear. That plus your witness statement plus Cashin's plate shows pre-installation. Ilara's voice stayed steady. Enough to make the public ask why locks were ready before the vote. Station speakers crackled and settled into a clean channel. Too clean to be local. Envoy Nerez Call's voice filled the gallery. Cashin Reese. Dr. Ilara Voss. You have removed a protected witness and interfered with station stability. You will return Merrick Hollis to Concord custody, Call said, calm like weather. Cashin did not answer. He listened. Call continued. If you refuse, Protocol 9 relay will be enacted. The station will be placed in a restricted state until compliance safety is restored, Call said. Life support will be prioritized for essential Concord personnel only. Ilara flinched, rage flashing. He is threatening to let civilians die. Merrick whispered, terrified. Protocol 9 is murder dressed like policy. Rowan swallowed. They can do it. They have authorization keys. Cashin lifted a hand, quieting them. He spoke flat so fear would not get a vote. They can do it if they believe nobody will see the choice, Cashin said. We make it visible. Call's voice returned, colder. You have a short window to comply. Return the witness and surrender your evidence, Call said. You will be escorted from the station. The doctor will be permitted to resume her duties, Call added, like Ilara was a reward. Ilara stared at the speaker. He is still using me as a leash. Cashin kept his eyes on Merrick. He is using the station as a leash. Cashin answered, short and sharp. Protocol 9 kills the station. You will own that. Call replied without pause. The Concord Assembly owns policy. You own your next choice. Cashin almost smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Call had admitted the shape of it. They were willing to kill a station to keep a cover intact. Cashin turned to Rowan. We need a channel they cannot fully control, Cashin said. Rowan hesitated. They control standard relay trunk. They block Terran lanes. Cashin spotted a ladder to a side maintenance catwalk. A scratched placard read a station nickname. Neutral ladder. Rowan followed his gaze and nodded slowly. That is a service climb to a neutral carrier line. It is used for maintenance pings and safety acknowledgements. Between stations, Rowan said. It can still carry short bursts even when main lanes are blocked. Cashin nodded. That was enough. Call's voice cut in again. Your window is closing. Cashin answered quietly. So is yours. He grabbed Marek's stamped chit and the chronoseal plate. Then he looked at Ilara. You keep him moving, Cashin said. If he faints, you drag him anyway. Ilara's eyes flashed. I know. Cashin looked at Rowan. You climb with me. You run the burst. You make it understandable. No long story, Cashin added. Rowan nodded, terrified but ready. Yes. Footsteps echoed below, soft and steady. The retrieval cadre was closing again. They climbed the ladder fast. The catwalk above was narrow and open to the relay gallery. Air up there was warmer, full of electrical hum. Rowan popped a junction box and exposed 3 connectors and a short coil of cable. Nothing looked like a revolution. It looked like maintenance. Ilara and Merrick waited at the base of the ladder, half hidden behind a relay trunk. Marek's face was gray, but his eyes stayed fixed on Cashin like Cashin was the only thing keeping him from being erased. The retrieval cadre entered the gallery below, silent and calm. 2 operatives spread out. One moved toward Ilara. One moved toward the ladder. Cashin dropped down 2 rungs in a controlled slide and landed between the operative and the ladder base. He held the null kit like a heavy toolbox, a barrier more than a weapon. "You take one more step and you do it over me," Cashin said. The operative paused. The voice was low and almost polite. "Return the asset," the operative said. Cashin kept his tone flat. "He is not an asset. He is a person." The operative moved anyway. Cashin sidestepped and drove the module into the operative's shoulder, not to break bones, but to redirect. The operative hit the rail and rebounded, fast. Cashin felt a gloved hand clamp for his wrist. Cashin twisted and used the rail as a brace to pull the operative into the post. The grip loosened for a fraction of a second. Cashin used it to shove the operative back. Space was all he needed. Ilara grabbed Merrick and hauled him behind the relay trunk. Rowan shouted from above, voice cracking. "I have it. I need 10 seconds. Cashin heard it and made it a goal. Another operative started up the ladder, fluid speed. Cashin could not reach him in time. Cashin made a hard choice and used a rule the enemy could not ignore. He raised the chronoseal plate and Marek stamped Chit toward the gallery cameras. He spoke loud enough for any mic to catch. "Chronoseal stamps do not match station time," Cashin said. Locks were installed before the vote. Project Glass vote is a cover, Cashin added, and the words were designed to travel. The operative on the ladder froze for a fraction of a heartbeat. It was not fear, it was calculation. Call's voice snapped through the speakers, no longer calm. "Stop. Now." Cashin felt grim satisfaction. The top layer had reacted. That meant the proof was already cutting into their cover. Rowan's voice rang from above. "Burst is ready." Cashin looked at the operative in front of him. "You wanted quiet. You picked the wrong station." The operative lunged again. Cashin stepped aside and slammed the operative into the ladder post. Up on the catwalk, Rowan jammed the cable into the junction and hit the manual send switch. A tiny indicator light flickered, weak but steady. Rowan shouted, words tumbling. "Neutral ladder burst is out. It is going to independent relay auditors and the open lane bulletin." Cashin did not know how far it would go. He only knew it had left their hands. A secret was only a weapon after it moved. Call's voice returned, sharp with controlled anger. "Protocol 9 relay will be enacted immediately." Ilara's eyes widened. "He is doing it." The station responded through the air. Fans shifted, doors thumped, and somewhere heaters died. The retrieval cadre did not panic. They moved faster. Cashin grabbed Ilara's arm. "We go. Now." Ilara hauled Merrick upright. Marek's lips were blue at the edges. "I can walk," Merrick rasped. "Do it," Ilara said. "Because if you fall, I will drag you." Cashin moved them toward a side service hatch into the relay trunk maze. Rowan dropped from the ladder, landing hard but upright. His eyes were wide with fear and relief. "It is out," Rowan said. "It is really out." Cashin nodded once. "Good." Rowan swallowed. "Now what?" Cashin looked into corridors where lights dimmed in sections. Protocol 9 squeezed the station into a smaller survival box. "We make them choose in public," Cashin said. "Either they back down, or they kill." A station on record. Ilara's voice was tight. "And if they choose to kill it?" Cashin did not pretend. "Then we get people to the rescue ship before the station goes silent. And we do not let Merrick disappear," Cashin added. Behind them, a retrieval cadre operative rose and moved again, relentless. Cashin tightened his grip on the null kit and led the group into the trunk maze. Now every door was a negotiation with cold. Cashin's goal became simple and brutal. Get Merrick to breathable air, keep Ilara on her feet, and keep Asterline from losing its oxygen cleaning system while Protocol 9 tried to freeze the place into silence. Lights did not fully die, but they dimmed in patches like rolling blackouts. Air smelled sharper, like filters were working too hard and still losing. Rowan kept close, breathing loud through his nose. Trunk maze leads to thermal deck. If oxygen system is going to fail, that is where it shows first. Ilara tightened her grip on Marek's arm. He is slipping. Marek's steps dragged. His face was pale and damp, eyes losing focus. Cashin kept his voice flat so fear would not take over. We make it to the oxygen deck. You breathe. You talk when you can, Cashin added. Marek tried to nod. They will cut it. They will let the air go bad. They will try, Cashin said. I am not letting them do it quietly. They turned a corner and nearly ran into a sealed hatch. A fresh collar sat on the seam, and cold lock bolts were extended on both sides like thick knuckles. Cashin did not waste a second. Traps always had a handle. He found an access panel half hidden behind a cable trunk and popped it with the null kit. A manual lever cluster waited inside. Rowan panted. That lever dumps heat feed and releases bolts. It triggers a local alarm, Rowan said. It also dumps cold back into this corridor. Cashin pulled it anyway. The seam loosened. Cold poured through like water. They pushed into the next corridor and Cashin slammed the hatch behind them. Bolts clacked back into place a moment later. Call wanted the station to die on paper, not in his hands. Protocol 9 was the paper. Measured footsteps followed, and the faint whir of a small motor tool. The retrieval cadre kept pace. Cashin led them into the thermal deck entrance. The corridor opened into a wide service bay with exposed pipes, heat exchangers, and a maze of vents. It smelled like hot metal and old coolant. Air here was warmer, but it felt sick. Warmth was not comfort. It was strain. Rowan pointed at a wall gauge with a simple colored strip. The strip had dipped into the danger band, and it kept sliding. It is overheating, Rowan said. They forced the coil load earlier. Now the reclaimer support loop is paying for it. Ilara watched Marek's breathing. If oxygen reclaimer loses its cooling support, the scrubbers will degrade faster. Marek swallowed, eyes wide again. That is what they want. A failure that looks like shortage. Cashin stepped closer to the main exchanger manifold. He could hear the metal pinging as it expanded under stress. Asterline was a living machine, and Protocol 9 was making it choose who got to breathe. Cashin made the next call. Rowan, show me the manual path that keeps scrubbers stable without burning the core, Cashin said. Rowan hesitated, terrified. It will trip more alarms. They will seal this deck. They are going to seal it anyway, Cashin said. I want it sealed after we make it survivable. Rowan moved to a panel and popped it. Inside was an older mechanical assembly with 2 levers and a lock pin. Rowan pointed. This splits cooling flow. It keeps the oxygen reclaimer stable, but it dumps heat into auxiliary bays. If someone is trapped there, they get cooked, Rowan added. Cashin's eyes narrowed. Which bays? Rowan checked the maintenance tablet. His face tightened. Dockside holding corridors. The same routes they keep pushing people into. Cashin understood. It was not just starvation. It was positioning. Ilara's voice turned sharp. Cashin, if you dump heat there, civilians might be in those corridors. Cashin nodded once. Then we do not dump it blindly. He looked at Rowan. Is there a throttle point? Something we can feather? Rowan blinked and nodded fast. Yes. We can set it partial. It buys time, not forever. Cashin leaned in. Do it. Partial. Then we move. Rowan's hands shook as he pulled the lock pin. He adjusted the lever to a mid-position. The manifold changed tone. Not quieter, but steadier. The heat pinging in the pipes eased, and the airflow through vents gained a little strength. It was not victory, it was a longer breath. A voice came through the deck speaker, and it was not Call this time. It was Commander Thane Core, close and smug. Unauthorized thermal adjustment detected, Core said. Return the witness. Cashin answered without looking up. You are freezing civilians to protect a lie. Core chuckled. Civilians are a complication. Compliance is clarity. Cashin's jaw tightened. You are not compliance. You are cover. Boots echoed at the thermal deck entry. Quiet, controlled. The retrieval cadre again. Ilara helped Merrick sit on a low-maintenance bench. Marek's breathing was thin, but the color in his lips improved slightly with steadier air. Rowan whispered. They will seal us in here. Cashin scanned the deck. He saw something that made sense of the motor whir. A portable bolt driver on a cadre belt. Tools, not weapons. They did not need to shoot him. They needed to close the last door. Cashin spoke low to Ilara. If they take Merrick now, they erase the proof. Ilara's eyes hardened. Then we do not let them take him. Rowan's voice shook. We do not have the beacon now. We fired the burst, but we do not know if it landed. Cashin nodded. Then we force a second message through an older path. One that lives on habit, not permission. Rowan stared. What older path? Cashin pointed to the thermal deck's emergency signage, small and plain. It marked an evacuation route to docking ring service rails. Not the public concourse. A maintenance rail that always remained serviceable. Rowan understood, eyes widening. Manual distress coil. It can radiate a short analog pulse. It is like banging on a pipe in a sinking ship, Rowan said. Crude, but it travels. Cashin looked at him. Can it reach Kestrel Mercy? Rowan hesitated, then nodded. If they are still powered and listening for mechanical safety pings, yes. Ilara leaned forward. Do it. Rowan moved toward the distress coil cabinet. Cashin stepped to meet the cadre at the entry before they reached the bench. Two operatives entered, posture calm. One held a restraint strap. The other held a compact bolt driver. They did not shout. They moved as if the outcome was already signed. Cashin planted himself between them and Ilara. He held the null kit like a block of dense metal. Return the witness, one operative said. Cashin kept his tone flat. Not happening. The operative stepped in. Cashin met him, not with a swing, but with a shove and a turn. He used the tight spacing of the thermal deck the way a mechanic used a narrow engine bay. Rails and pipes became edges, and edges became leverage. The second operative tried to flank. Cashin backed one step and forced the flank into a pipe bank where movement slowed. Ilara stayed with Merrick, hand on his shoulder, ready to move him if Cashin bought a gap. Rowan worked the cabinet latch with shaking hands. The first operative grabbed for Cashin's wrist. Cashin twisted and slammed the wrist into a railing, breaking the grip without breaking the person. The second operative raised the bolt driver toward a nearby hatch seam. Cashin saw the intention. Seal the deck. Isolate the problem. Cashin shoved the null kit forward like a heavy toolbox and used it to knock the driver hand offline. The tool clattered to the floor. The operative's posture changed, less polite. Cashin felt the escalation. He heard Rowan shout from behind, voice cracking. Distress coil is live. A low vibration rose through the deck, more felt than heard, like a metal throat clearing. Rowan continued, forcing words into the transmission in simple terms. Asterline relay station is under forced rationing. Evidence of pre-installed locks exists. Witness Merrick Hollis is in danger. Request immediate support from Kestrel Mercy and any independent relay auditors. Rowan paused, then added the part that mattered most for rescue. Protocol 9 is active. Civilians are being deprioritized. Cashin did not know how far the pulse would travel. He only knew it was now beyond them, in the corridor, in the void. If anyone was listening, it would land like a punch. The operatives pushed harder. Cashin gave ground by inches, not because he was losing, but because he was steering. He drove them away from the bench. He kept the path behind him open for Ilara to move Merrick if needed. Then the deck speaker crackled again, and this time it was call, closer and less controlled. Stop transmission. Stop now. Cashin felt a grim satisfaction. Call had heard it. That meant the pulse had touched a channel Call could not fully lock. Call continued, colder. Protocol 9 is lawful. You are obstructing lawful stabilization. Ilara shouted back. Lawful does not mean breathable. Merrick coughed and forced words out. The stamps were ready before the vote. That is the whole crime. Call did not answer Merrick. Call addressed Cashin like a man trying to end a problem with authority. Return the witness and this ends, Call said. Cashin answered, and he made it about the only thing Call could not tolerate. Your burst is already out. And now your station is speaking in public too. The operatives hesitated for a fraction. Not fear. Calculation again. Cashin used that fraction. He shoved one operative into a pipe bank and kicked the bolt driver away under the exchanger rack. Then he turned to Ilara. Move Merrick. We go to Kestrel Mercy. Now. Ilara hauled Merrick up. Marek's knees wobbled, but the air held him a little better. Rowan grabbed his tablet and ran to lead them. They moved through the thermal deck's maintenance exit, a tight corridor that fed into a service rail toward Dock Theta. Behind them, Boots followed. The retrieval cadre did not give up. The corridor lights dimmed again, and a heavy seal thumped shut somewhere to their left. Rowan pointed without stopping. Keep right. Service rail stays open for emergency access. Ilara kept Merrick upright, her grip like a clamp. Look at me, Merrick. Breathe in. Breathe out. Merrick tried to comply. If they catch me, they will say I disappeared in the cold. Cashin kept his eyes forward. Then we do not let you disappear. They hit a service junction overlooking the docking ring. Through a grated window, Cashin could see the Kestrel Mercy berth. The rescue ship sat like a patient animal, power lights low, thrusters cold. A small group moved on its ramp, crew checking seals and watching the station with the cautious posture of people who expected trouble. Rowan's voice broke with relief. They are still there. Cashin's mind shifted to the last hard problem. Getting to the ramp without being pinned. The docking ring was a funnel. It always was. Cashin scanned overhead rails and saw mag clamps still pulsing. Not as violent as earlier, but unstable. He also saw something new. A cluster of compliance officers at the far end, forming a loose line. Kor had positioned them there to make the last corridor a negotiation. Ilara tightened her grip. They will take Merrick at the ramp. Cashin nodded once. Then we do not ask permission to board. Rowan pointed to a side ladder descending to a lower service catwalk that ran under the main ramp line. It is dirty and narrow, but it bypasses Kor's line. Cashin looked at Merrick. Can you climb? Merrick swallowed. I can. If I have to. Ilara answered for him. He will. They took the ladder. The lower catwalk smelled like grease and cold metal. Below them, a thin layer of frost-coated cable runs like powdered glass. Cashin moved first and checked each step. One slip here was a broken ankle and a dead witness. They reached a hatch that opened beneath the Kestrel Mercy ramp support. Rowan popped it with the null kit, and the hatch gave way. They emerged into a shadowed space behind ramp structures and fueling conduits. Above, they could hear voices, and Kor's voice was among them. Cashin signaled for silence. Ilara kept Merrick pressed close. Rowan pointed to a narrow access gap that fed directly onto the ramp base. "We go one at a time." Cashin nodded. Ilara and Merrick first. Ilara guided Merrick through. Marek's breathing hitched, but he moved. Cashin followed, then Rowan. They stepped onto the ramp base, and the Kestrel Mercy crew saw them instantly. A crew chief, older and calm, raised a hand. "Identify." Cashin spoke fast and plain. "Terran Relay Authority Contractor." "Doctor." "Witness." "Protocol 9 is active," Cashin added. "They are deprioritizing civilians. We need extraction." The crew chief's eyes narrowed. He looked past Cashin and saw movement on the dock. Compliance officers were converging, and Kor was at their center. Kor raised his voice. "Stop. That witness is Concord property." The crew chief did not flinch. "This is an evacuation vessel." Kor stepped closer. "By Concord order, you are not authorized to depart." The crew chief's expression stayed flat. "We are authorized to keep people alive." Kor's jaw tightened. "Hand him over." Cashin stepped between Kor's line and Merrick. He held up the chronoseal plate. "Locks were installed before the vote," Cashin said. "You know it." Kor's smile vanished. For the first time he looked like a man who had stepped onto thin ice. Call's voice cut through the station speakers again, tight with anger. "Kestrel Mercy, you will stand down. Departure will be considered a hostile act." The crew chief looked up at the speaker, then back at Cashin. "Did your proof leave the station?" Rowan swallowed and answered. "Neutral ladder burst is out. Distress coil is out." He heard it. Rowan nodded toward the speakers. "That is why he is yelling now." The crew chief made a decision with a small motion. He waved two crew forward. They moved like professionals, not soldiers. They took Merrick by the arms and guided him up the ramp. Ilara went with him, never letting go. Kor stepped forward, and Cashin stepped into him, not striking, just blocking. Kor's officers raised restraint straps. Cashin spoke low, just for Kor. "If you grab him here, you do it on an evacuation ramp. You do it while your envoy threatens civilian death on open channel," Cashin added. Kor's eyes flicked to the cameras. The docking ring always had cameras. Kor's problem was not Cashin. Kor's problem was visibility. Call's voice snapped again. "Commander Kor, retrieve the witness now." Kor hesitated. That hesitation was Cashin's leverage. Because Call's calm was gone, and calm was the mask. Cashin turned his head slightly and spoke toward the Kestrel Mercy crew chief, loud enough for the dock mics. "Protocol 9 is active. Concord personnel are prioritized over civilians." "That is not stabilization," Cashin said. "That is execution by policy." Call cut in, sharp. "Stop speaking." Cashin kept going. "If you want the witness, come take him with cameras recording." The crew chief looked at Kor and then at the nearest wall screen, where Call's words continued to spill through the speakers. The crew chief raised his hand and keyed the ship's external channel. "Kestrel Mercy to open lane bulletin," the crew chief said. "We confirm Protocol 9 threat is being broadcast. We are taking civilians and a protected witness aboard for medical safety," the crew chief continued. Concord compliance is a tempting interdiction. That was the moment the station felt different. Not warmer and not safer, but different. The speakers crackled, and a new voice entered, clipped and official. It was not call. It was a relay auditor channel, faint but present. Asterline Relay Station, this is Independent Relay Audit Board. We have received a neutral carrier burst and an analog distress coil pulse. Repeat, we have received evidence of time code mismatch on chronoseal certification. Call's channel tried to override, but it stuttered for a fraction as competing authority forced it to share space. The auditor voice continued. Any enactment of life support deprioritization against civilians will be logged as deliberate harm. All compliance actions are subject to immediate external review. Corps went still. Corps' officers looked at each other, suddenly aware they were not alone anymore. Call's voice returned, strained. This is an internal Concord matter. The auditor answered, cold. It ceased being internal when civilian life support became leverage. Cashin felt the air shift in his chest. It was not relief. It was a new kind of pressure. Visibility was now a weapon pointed both ways. Corps' jaw worked. He stepped back a fraction. Cashin saw it, the smallest retreat of a man who realized the room had witnesses. Corps spoke, careful now. We are conducting lawful stabilization. The auditor replied. Then you will do it with civilians breathing and with evidence preserved. Ilara's voice came from the ramp above. Cashin, move. Merrick was already inside the ship. Ilara was half inside, looking back like she refused to leave anyone behind. Rowan grabbed Cashin's sleeve. Go. Now. Cashin stepped backward up the ramp, slow and deliberate, eyes on Corps and the compliance line. He did not turn his back until the last step took him under the ship's floodlights. Corps' officers did not lunge. They watched the auditor channel icon flicker on the dock screens, and they understood what a record meant. Call's voice snapped through the speakers again, hard and thin. Kestrel Mercy will be impounded for obstruction. The auditor answered without heat. Your threat is noted and logged. Any attempt to seize an evacuation vessel while civilians are endangered will be treated as interference with life-saving action. Cashin crossed the threshold. The ramp crew pulled him in and sealed the inner hatch. The ship's corridor smelled like warmed metal and clean filters. It hit Cashin like a reminder. Air could be a weapon. Air could be a mercy. Ilara pushed Merrick onto a bench in the medical bay. She checked his pupils, his pulse, then his breathing, hands steady even while her jaw shook with rage. You are alive, Ilara told him. Stay that way. Merrick nodded, eyes wet, too tired to argue. They were going to make me vanish. They still might try, Cashin said. Not in the dark anymore. Rowan arrived behind him, face pale, hands still stained with grease. He looked past Cashin at the sealed hatch, as if expecting it to fail. They are going to lock the station down harder, Rowan said. Cashin looked at the ship. Status panel on the bulkhead. The Kestrel Mercy crew chief stood in the doorway, calm and watchful. We are not leaving blind, the crew chief said. We are waiting for the auditor to give us clearance and a recorded lane. Call's voice tried again on the open channel. It sounded like a man forcing calm back onto his face. Independent board, you are exceeding your mandate. The auditor answered. Your mandate ended when you threatened civilians to retrieve a witness. A quiet pause followed. Then the ship's external channel chimed with a new update from the auditor. Asterline Relay Station is now under emergency external review. Protocol 9 enactment is suspended pending immediate audit. Cashin felt Rowan exhale, like a man who had been holding his breath for days. On the dock screens outside, heaters in several zones flickered back to life. Not because Call cared. Because the record now had teeth. Call's voice returned, smaller. This is temporary. The auditor answered. Temporary is how you keep people alive. Ilara leaned close to Cashin, voice low. My staff is still on that station. Cashin met her eyes. They will be safer now that Call cannot pretend nobody is watching. Ilara did not look satisfied. She looked determined. Merrick sat up a little straighter, clutching his stamped chit like it was the only thing on the ship that mattered. They will say I forged it, Merrick whispered. They will say I panicked. Cashin shook his head once. Let them. They can argue words forever, Cashin said. They cannot argue metal that does not match time. Rowan stared at Cashin. What about Core? Cashin answered without anger, because anger was waste. Core obeys power. Now power has witnesses, Cashin said. That is the only language he respects. The crew chief stepped in, eyes on Cashin. We have a corridor window. We can push off with independent clearance. Cashin looked through a small port at the dock. Core stood in place, posture stiff, surrounded by officers who suddenly looked unsure. Above them, the auditor channel icon stayed lit. Cashin turned back to Ilara and Merrick. You two stay together. Rowan, you keep your hands on the systems. If the station tries to spin a new story, you tell me where the seams are. Rowan swallowed. You are coming back, aren't you? Cashin did not promise a hero story. He promised a job. If the station needs a door opened, I will be there, Cashin said. The Kestrel Mercy thrummed as the engines came online. The ship did not leap forward. It moved with controlled force, like a tool being used correctly. Outside, Asterline's lights still dimmed in patches. Frostline still existed. People still waited for heat and air and answers. But now the threat had a name on a record, and the lie had a witness who was breathing. Cashin watched the dock fall away. He did not feel safe. He felt committed. Because Call had not lost. Call had been interrupted. And men like Call did not forgive interruptions. If you want the next part, stay with me. Like the video, share it with someone who loves hard choices, and subscribe so you do not miss what happens after the record goes public.